Cooper, and thanks for joining us on the New 100 Longevity Campaign. Today is a milestone episode because it is our 10th show, and it is our season finale for season 1. And I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you because this has been such a blast, and I have gotten so much out of the show, and I hope that you all have too. And when I first conceptualized this, I had no idea how truly impactful this content was going to be. And it's just been an incredible ride, and it's not over yet. In fact, Albert Einstein has said, once you stop learning, you start dying. And that's not going to be happening on my watch. So season 2 is around the bend. But I wanted to share with you because not a whole lot's been mentioned about the show sponsor. And so I just wanted to give you a little backstory about how we partnered. And it actually happened on the first episode with Dr. Sandra Kaufman. And she has the 5 top tier that she was sharing with us in her Kaufman protocol. NAD is one of the most important supplements to boost your NAD level. And I was actually taking an NAD supplement, but during the episode, a light bulb went off because I realized I was backing the wrong NAD horse. And she, and I will quote, said that Tru Niagen has a brilliant product, and their NR, their Nicotinamide Riboside, which is their patented ingredient, they cornered the market. And I really feel a difference being on their supplements. So today's episode is all about the benefits of NAD. And our guest, Dr. Charles Brenner, is the scientist, can you believe it, who discovered this. And he also, of course, is the lead scientific advisor for ChromaDex, which is the parent company of Tru Niagen. He has over 16 years of research on the subject matter, and he is truly the foremost authority on NAD metabolism. So I'm so excited to have him on. Let's get the show rolling and get started. Hi, Dr. Brenner. Thanks for joining us. Just to get started, how you found nicotinamide riboside and what led you to doing this research to begin with?
Okay. Well, it was around 2003, 2004. I was minding my own business, working on an enzyme. The enzyme happened to be something called glutamine-dependent NAD synthetase. I know that's a handful.
Yes.
And
translation?
it's an enzyme that makes NAD, the central catalyst of metabolism. And I was interested in it because of some real technical details of how the enzyme works. It has 2 active sites. I wanted to figure out how they work together and so forth. And the more I thought about that enzyme, the more I discovered that there could be some important unknown knowables in how NAD is made. And it occurred to me that there might be more than 2 NAD precursor vitamins plus tryptophan that could be NAD precursors. In the course of that work, we discovered nicotinamide riboside as a 3rd vitamin precursor of NAD. And
the most effective way to have the vitamin get into your system?
It looks like that's the case. So NAD is a coenzyme. It's something that is in all of our cells and tissues in order to catalyze all of the transformations that make us alive. It's more fundamental than to make us human, because you can't be an apple, a worm, a yeast. You can't be anything. You can't be anything living without NAD coenzymes, of which there's actually 4. NADs are NAD+, NADH, NADP+, and NADPH. Okay, these 4 coenzymes receive and donate electrons in hundreds of different biochemical transformations. So not only when we convert our food into biological energy of ATP, but also when we convert everything that we eat into everything that we are, right? because we have to make all of our own RNA and DNA and protein and lipids in all of our cells,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We make our own steroids. We make our own androgens and estrogens. We make our own bone. We make our own cells. The way the body works is everything is broken down and built up anew. And all of those reactions are metabolism, and all of those metabolic transformations require NAD coenzymes. So NAD coenzymes are the fundamental catalyst of life. And nicotinamide riboside is one of the vitamin precursors of those coenzymes. We've done a lot of research. I mean, we started out in yeast cells, we went to mice and rats and people. And I think I was the first, I must have been the first person to take
Zero.
pure nicotinamide riboside, right? And now what we understand is that nicotinamide riboside NR is the largest piece of NAD that can go into a cell and fill up your NAD stores. It costs less ATP, it costs less biological energy to rebuild NAD from NR than from any other precursor. And for that reason, we think that NR is more effective, kind of pound for pound at rebuilding NAD.
Yes. Well, you don't just think it, you have research to back it. In fact, I was doing a little stalking on the internet and found quite a few, like dozens and dozens of clinical trials and research that you've done over 16 plus years.
But dozens and dozens would include all of the preclinical work that we've done as well. What really shows that NR is special is to understand the conditions in which NAD comes under metabolic stress. Okay, so what I'd like to describe to your viewers is the concept that NAD coenzymes are the crown jewels of metabolism. Now, before you get an image of the NAD coenzymes being locked inside of a vault, patrolled by armed guards inside a castle, patrolled by more guards, I want you to understand that NAD coenzymes, although they are the crown jewels, are actually exposed to the elements of metabolic stress. So, for example, sun exposure, reactive oxygen species, overnutrition, which is a problem for 2/3 of Americans.
You're saying that's another word for obesity?
Well, overnutrition means overweight plus obesity. So a third of us are obese, a third of us are overweight, 2/3 of us have a problem of overnutrition. And we're bigger than we ought to be, and we're carrying around more weight than we ought to, and
Right.
we have more inflammatory fat cells and so forth and so on. So what I was saying is that there's 8, 10 different conditions of metabolic stress that disturb the NAD system. Overweight, alcohol use, sun exposure, reactive oxygen, DNA damage, time zone disruption, which almost certainly disturbs the NAD system. We know neurodegeneration and heart failure disturb the NAD system. Now, what's really interesting is these conditions of metabolic stress that disturb NAD and lower the level of very important NAD coenzymes like NAD plus and NADPH. These conditions usually induce the gene expression of nicotinamide riboside kinase genes. Okay, let me unpack that for you.
Okay, please.
We have the most important coenzymes that allow our body to convert fuel into energy, to convert our food into what we are, that allow us to flex our muscles, beat our heart, think, repair our DNA. Conditions of metabolic stress disturb metabolism by disturbing the NAD system. And this is very important.
Yeah.
Under those conditions of metabolic stress, the genes that we depend on to convert NR into NAD get upregulated, meaning that a damaged tissue is basically telling us it's looking for NR in order to maintain its NAD. Most striking example that I've ever seen was in heart failure.
Oh, wow.
Now, this was a mouse study, but it's starting to be done in humans, and there's human data that indicate that there are types of human heart failure that are very much like what we saw in mice, which is that mice that were going to experience heart failure were dropping their heart levels of NAD and increasing the gene expression of nicotinamide riboside kinase. So
Wow.
their NAD is going down, and the failing heart is turning up a gene that we use, the mouse uses and we use,
Yeah.
to convert NR into NAD,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And so when we gave those mice NR, we protected them against heart failure,
That's
right?
amazing. That's amazing.
So folks up in Seattle, looked at that study and they said, we got to enroll some human beings,
Yeah.
with heart failure. And they've just actually published their first result showing that nicotinamide riboside was safe in that population, that the more NR elevated their NAD, the more of an anti-inflammatory response they were able to observe. And so we think that this really has a potential
It's amazing.
to affect people under metabolic stress.
What was the time frame of that?
Yeah, so that's one of the problems right now, is that clinical trials are really expensive. And so they're generally not being conducted for long enough periods of time to really see the kind of effects that you'd like to see over months and years, right?
Right.
There's some of us that have taken nicotinamide riboside for years, but I don't have any disease and condition. So, what are you going to expect from
Even in the short time that you did the study, like what was it, 12 weeks, 10 weeks?
12 weeks, I believe, is the longest study that has been done. There was a 12-week study of which I'm a co-author that was done in Denmark of insulin insufficient, basically type 2 diabetic obese men in Denmark. And they went 12 weeks. And there was good news and kind of bad news about the studies. It was published, I call it dollar up et al. It was the first Danish nicotinamide riboside study. And so the good news is that, first of all, the safety data were beautiful. These guys they were all guys, they were older men. They got 2 grams of nicotinamide riboside a day, every day for 12 weeks. So they got a really high dose.
A high dose.
Consumer dose is like 300 milligrams a day. So these guys are getting 6 2/3 times that daily.
There was no side effects?
So no dose dependent. Like over 12 weeks, you enroll enough people, somebody's had a tummy ache on one day or another. But when you compare the placebo to the high dose nicotinamide riboside, you don't see excess of any kind of problem, right? If you were dosing these people with even 250 milligrams of niacin, one of the classical forms of vitamin B3, pretty much every person would have gotten flushing. So their face would have turned red, their ears would have itched and turned red, and they would have been uncomfortable for a couple hours after taking the
Niacin.
That's from nicotinic acid niacin.
Okay.
There's no flushing whatsoever with high dose NR. It's never been reported. There were basically no serious adverse events that were found. So that's good news, right?
That's huge.
Now, also, the other thing that I put in the good news category is that it looked like we were, the way I term it, moving the needle on fatty liver. If you compare the people that were on the high dose NR to the people that were on placebo, the people on high dose NR had about a 2% drop in fatty liver. I mean, they had a very fatty liver. It was like 11% hepatic lipids, like a section of their liver.
Yeah.
11% of that section
That's
is fat.
in such
Got
a short time.
dropped to around 9. Okay, so 2%, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Compared to placebo, which was 0.2% drop. So basically, on placebo, there's no change. The problem is statistics, when you analyze the variability in the starting lipids and the variability in the ending lipids, we were not able to conclude to statistical confidence that NR did that. Okay, it had a p-value of 0.13, which is a good p-value, but for the dollar up study to say NR lowered hepatic lipids, you have to get to what's called a p-value of less than 0.05.
And you have to do that for an extended period of time to get there.
And you need to repeat the study. It's like the thing is, the people were not randomized for fatty liver. They were randomized for weight loss and for insulin sensitivity. And you and I both know that 65 or 70-year-old people that don't exercise are not going to lose weight in 12 weeks. Right. So my current recommendation for clinical trialists is get everyone to do exercise as a standard of care.
Okay.
Right? And you test the effect of NR in that population. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I want to recommend the trial.
I didn't know when you say preclinical, that means not human.
Right. So, I mean, we started in 2004, we were in yeast, although we also, identified the mouse and human genes in 2004 for these nicotinamide riboside kinase genes. So we've known about the human pathway since 2004. We've published our first human thing in 2016. And so human nicotinamide riboside published studies have only gone back to 4 years now.
So there was a preclinical study that was done with postpartum, and there was incredible results. So if you can share with us that.
So one of the challenges for me in my career is I want nicotinamide riboside to be as useful as possible to people, right? Here's how we started to connect NAD to postpartum. I was sitting in my office thinking about the powerful effects of nicotinamide riboside in diseases and conditions of metabolic stress, right? Like heart failure, neurodegeneration, and so forth. I look at the label of Tru Niagen and it says not intended to treat any disease or condition, right? So I'm thinking every animal experiment that we do, the NR, Niagen, has a much greater effect on the sick animals, the animals under metabolic stress, than the perfectly healthy animals, right?
Right.
And I think about myself, I'm a pretty healthy animal taking Tru Niagen. Maybe the people taking that are under a greater degree of metabolic stress should be the ones taking Tru Niagen. But that requires a lot more clinical trialing, right?
And that costs money.
Clinical testing, which also costs money, right?
Right.
So at that exact moment, my assistant walked into my office 6 months pregnant. And I'm thinking about,
I love it.
I get it. I know it's not a disease, but I can tell you about conditions of metabolic stress that are part of the female life cycle. And every woman that has been pregnant will tell you about the metabolic transformation that happens in her body when she's creating a baby, and then yet another metabolic transformation that occurs when she has that baby.
Right.
and her body transforms into the lactation program in which she's providing essentially 100% of the macronutrients and the micronutrients for the baby. And that's a tremendous metabolic stress. Sometimes when I give my talk about postpartum, um, and I'm in a group of women, they'll say, "Oh, my sister had serious postpartum." And I said, "Aren't you a mom too?" And she'll say, "Yes, I'm a mom." And I'm saying, "Well, all of you moms experience postpartum. I'm not just talking about postpartum depression. I'm talking about the metabolic stress
Yes.
that you just gave birth to a baby.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, if you are breastfeeding, there's a tremendous program that is mobilizing protein, fat, and carbohydrate from your body to go to your mammary to produce the milk that is going to be the baby's food. And we wanted to determine whether the NAD system is disturbed under those types of metabolic stresses.
Right.
And the answer is, the punchline is that mice and rats that are given nicotinamide riboside in the period in which they are lactating, so in the immediate postpartum period, they have an advantage in milk production. They produce more milk. They produce better milk. Under certain conditions, they lose more weight, right?
They're faster.
And the offspring do better.
The beam, the mouse on the beam.
Well, you're talking about the offspring. Then the offspring develops better. The offspring neurodevelopment is advanced. Their coordination system is advanced. And the remarkable thing is that even though we did the nutritional intervention just for mom for 21 days while the mom was the equivalent of breastfeeding,
Right.
the offspring are mentally advantaged throughout their whole life.
That's insane.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, but hold on. There's one thing. Dr. Sandra Kaufman said that your NAD levels are fine until you like are in your like maybe 40 years of age. But what you're saying is completely opposite. Like anyone would benefit from boosting their NAD levels.
Yeah, you want to know something? I list, in a slide that I have in my talks, 9 or 10 conditions of metabolic stress that strikingly disturb the NAD system. I say that it's widely reported that NAD declines in aging. Actually, the data in the 9 or 10 other conditions of metabolic stress are much more striking than aging. I think that there's episodes of metabolic stress like sunburn, infection, that strikingly attack our NAD system. And our NAD may sort of slowly decline, or it may be that it's episodes of infection and inflammation and life happens, right? S blah, blah, blah happens in life that correlates with time. I'm not sure if it's time itself that is a timer on our NAD.
Okay.
I don't think that that's really known.
There was another study that I'd like to mention, which was for Alzheimer's and dementia. And that was something actually my own father suffered from with dementia. So share with us that research because it was also beneficial against dementia.
There's a lot of mouse and other studies that show multiple types of neurodegeneration in NAD is under attack. The nicotinamide riboside kinase genes are strongly protective, and if we give those animals NR, then they can boost their NAD, and this is a protective function for resiliency and neuroprotection, and that's going to be tested clinically. In fact, probably in coming months and years, there'll be the first clinical, human studies that assess the potential for nicotinamide riboside to help people with mild cognitive impairment, which would be kind of early Alzheimer's. NAD comes under attack in many types of neurodegenerative conditions. Nicotinamide riboside kinase genes are on under those conditions, and that allows oral nicotinamide riboside to protect the brain and protect damaged nerves from degeneration. And
Yeah.
so what we're, hoping to be able to determine is whether nicotinamide riboside will be safely tolerated by people with mild cognitive impairment and whether it will protect their mental health.
Yes, and you had mentioned previously that you're extremely healthy, and so am I. But I can say that I've been on Tru Niagen for about 6, 7 months. I was backing the wrong NAD horse previous to that, and I can tell you I feel a difference. So I have more energy, and I know that it's definitely doing something even with people who are healthy and they don't have the inflammation. So what do you see for the future for NR? What's coming down the pipeline?
It's a combination of things. It's, people like me that are looking at the mechanisms by which nicotinamide riboside and NAD are protective, and then helping people to design the right clinical studies so that we can randomize and measure the right endpoints. We always put safety first when we do human clinical studies. My laboratory has recently moved to City of Hope National Medical Center outside of Los Angeles. And, we're expanding our NAD program in a number of different fronts. We're interested in what I call diabesity, which is sort of type 2 diabetes and overweight. We're interested in infection, inflammation, and we're also interested in malignancies, cancer prevention and treatment. All of those things disturb the NAD system in different ways. And so we're trying to do the mechanistic work in the laboratory and then work with clinician scientists to do the clinical trials that will test the efficacy of NAD boosting strategies like Niagen.
Yes, and also tell us your new role over at the City of Hope.
Yeah, I've been named the Alfred E. Mann Chair of a new department of diabetes and cancer metabolism. We think it's the first department of diabetes and cancer metabolism in the world. So people in our department, we're going to be recruiting faculty members as well as postdocs and grad students. We'll be working on all types of different metabolic disruptions that occur in overweight, in diabetes, and in cancer, and looking at ways that we can prevent these types of illnesses and maintain optimum health.
Amazing. So would you be able to pull in your NR research to?
Oh, we've transferred all of our research to City of Hope. Yes, been supported by the Melinda Gates Foundation for our work that relates to postpartum and women's health. And we've been long supported by the NIH. We've been supported by the National Science Foundation and others.
No, that's incredible. I'm so happy to hear that your work is being recognized. And it's the only NAD precursor that has been recognized by the FDA because let's be honest and address the elephant in the room. There are several other NAD supplement boosters on the market. There's, NMN and there's, to name all these different ones, but NR is the only one that's been recognized.
Right. NMN is not really a vitamin. So NMN is what cells form after they take up nicotinamide riboside. They put a phosphate on it, and then another chemical group comes on it, and it becomes NAD, and then another phosphate can be put on it, becomes NADP, and so forth and so on. So there are some people that have advocated for using NMN. It doesn't really make scientific sense to use NMN because NMN has a phosphate on it that has to come off. So a chemist is basically going to the trouble to put a phosphate on NR when the body is taking that phosphate off before it can go into cells.
Right.
There's also no regulatory review of NMN. You don't know if you're getting something that is safe or something that's contaminated. So I certainly under no circumstance would advocate that someone take NMN.
Right, but as I keep referring back to Sandy, her episode, she said that you cornered the market, so everyone had no other alternative but to come up with Plan B. And Plan B is obviously not as fabulous as Plan A. So.
Well, the NR looks special in the sense that all cells that we know of have the NR pathway to make NAD, and stressed cells turn that pathway up. So stress cells are really looking for NR in order to boost their NADs. We know that NR is safe as Niagen, and we're very actively identifying the conditions of metabolic stress in people that will allow us to test the efficacy of NR, Niagen in important conditions of metabolic stress in people.
Yeah.
And so I think the future is bright for NAD research.
Yes, no, it's amazing. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so I love it. And thank you so much for all of the amazing work that you're doing, and good luck to you for the future. And thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks. Take care.
All right. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us on the new 100. And we'll see you season 2.
Okay.
Peace out. Much of the research that Dr. Brenner and I discussed this episode thus far is preliminary and preclinical interesting, but ultimately more work needs to be done to determine the effects in humans. Tru Niagen is a cellular health supplement that is not sold to treat, cure, or prevent disease. Tru Niagen fuels your body's energy engines, your mitochondria. It helps cells defend against metabolic stresses such as overeating, promotes repair at the cellular level, counteracting the effects of stress and time on your body, and helps the cells run more efficiently as you age, promoting youthful and cellular function.
I'm not backing down, 'cause the future is now. Not backing down, 'cause the future is now.